Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivara Hari Yashodanandana Rajajanarandana Yashodanandana Rajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Vanasari Jamuna Tira Vanasari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Yashodanandana Rajajanarandana Yashodanandana Rajajanarandana Muna Tera Vanasari Yamuna Tera Vanasari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Dayam Vishupad Paramahamsa Pri Vrajgacharya Stotra Satta Sri Simad His Divine Grace Siraboy Charandarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Skandiviti Founder Acharyas Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Samavata Bhakti Vrinda ki Hari Nam Sankirtan ki Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jani Thai Gauda Pimanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru to Sri Gauranga. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Sharakaya Taksuranmiritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gramahyam Vidati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Sya Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanditam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Vyayavasya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesha bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. And by regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil. And loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, whose praise with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Charitam Sakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swastayanam Mahad. Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Ask him if he can put some nimbu. Ada. E quante che? Yes, so we continue. We'll read one verse from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, entitled Divinity and Divine Service. Okay. Yes. Text 23. Yes. That is Brahma Samhita prose. Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastair.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakrite gunaste.
Yukta para purusha eka ihasya
Yukta para purusha eka hi asya dhate.
Stityadaye hari virinchi hariti samna.
Vidyadaye hari virinchi hareti samagya.
Shreyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanor nrinam syu.
Shreyamsi tatra khalu sattvatano nirnam shriyu.
Sattvam rajastama iti praktiter gunasvair.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakrite gunaste.
Sattvam rajastama iti praktiter gunastair.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakrite gunaste.
Yukta para purushak eka ihasya dhatte.
Yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhate.
Tetyadaye hari virinchi hariti samna.
Vidyadaye hari virinchi hareti sangya.
Shreyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanor nriram syu.
Shreyamsi tatra khalu sattvatanor nrinam shriyu.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastai.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakrite gunaste.
Yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhatte.
Yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhate.
Se chadaye hari virinchi hariti samna.
Vidyadaye hari virinchi hareti sangya.
Seyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanor nrinam syu.
Shreyamsi tatra khalu sattvatanor nrinam. Sattvam rajastama iti prakritirgunaste.
Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastair.
Yukta para purusha eka ihasya dhate.
Yukta para purusha eka hi hasya dhatte.
Stityadaye hare virinchi hareti sangya.
Sityadaye hari virinchi hariti samna.
Shreyamsi tatra kalu sattvatano nrinam shu.
Shreyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanot nrinam syu. Sattvam rajastama iti prakriter gunastair. Yukta para purusha eka hi hasya dhatte. Sityadaye hari virimshi hariti samjna. Seyamsi tatra kalu sattva tanor nrinam syu. Sattvam, goodness. Rajaha, passion. Tamaha, the darkness of ignorance. Iti, thus. Prakritehe, of the material nature. Gunaha, qualities. Tai, by them. Yuktaha, associated with. Paraha, transcendental. Purushaha, personality. Ekaha, one. Iha asya, of this material world. Dhatte, accepts. Stiti adaye, of the matter of creation, maintenance and destruction, etc. Hari, Vishnu, the personality of Godhead. Virinchi, Brahma. Hara, Lord Shiva. Iti, thus. Samgnaha, different features. Sriyamsi, ultimate benefit. Tatra, therein. Kalu, of course. Sattva, goodness. Tanoho, form. Nrinam, of the human being. Syu, derived. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. But we'll just read the translation. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form or the quality of goodness. Kindly repeat after me. The transcendental personality of Godhead is indirectly associated with the three modes of material nature, namely passion, goodness, and ignorance. And just for the material world's creation, maintenance and destruction, he accepts the three qualitative forms of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Of these three, all human beings can derive ultimate benefit from Vishnu, the form or the quality of goodness. So we continue reading from the Gita Nagari essay. Yeah. We are now well into the second portion, which is part two of the conception of Gita Nagari. That's the title. The verses we had read just before were in relation to Prabhupada was speaking about the inhabitants, those who will reside at Gita Nagari. They shall engage their everything, namely their life, their wealth, their intelligence, and the words in the service of the Lord. So this means that actually it is for those who are really surrendered or dedicated to the mission. And Prabhupada quoted the two very important verses from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Guyatamam Bhuya, followed by Sarva Dharman Parityaja. And now we are continuing where we left off. Those who are simultaneously a valiant warrior, worker without desire for fruitive result, erudite scholar for knowing God as He is, and pure devotee of the personality of Godhead. Such personalities only can serve the purposes of the Bhagavad Gita for the benefit of all concerned. So Prabhupada here is referring, valiant warrior, of course, is Kshatriyas. Worker without desire, well, those who are not in the category of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, they are assisting, working, but ideally without fruitive mentality. Everyday scholar is everyday scholar actually refers to Brahmana, no? And who is a pure devotee of the personality of Godhead? Huh? Well, actually, everyone within all these categories are meant to strive. Um, mm. So Prabhupada is telling such personalities only can serve the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita for the benefit of all concerned. Such heroes of transcendental fame are very dear to the personality of Godhead. And for them only, it is said in the last portion of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita that one should only carry out the order of Godhead and nothing else. And if in doing so anyone is subjected to tribulations of non-performance of other duties, he, Sri Krishna, will always save him, for that he may rest assured. Mm. The personality of Godhead is the only original friend and philosopher of everyone, and he is the father of all living beings. The Bhagavad Gita is his transcendental word, and it is identical, therefore, with Godhead in full potencies. Great Mahatmas do try to know this ultimate truth themselves and try to preach to others this sublime truth. So the dual responsibility of individuals is to individually cultivate this knowledge, um, to realize what is the absolute truth or who is the absolute truth, number one, and secondly, to preach that message. Uh, so Prabhupada continues here, the ultimate truth is that God, the world, and the living entities are co-related with one another as a complete whole. The personality of Godhead is the supreme Brahman. Nature is the infinite Brahman. And the living entities are infinitesimal Brahmans. So Prabhupada is trying to bring that awareness or consciousness that everything is interrelated and that ultimately everything is created by the Supreme Lord and everything is meant to be uh, properly harmonized. Yeah. uh, just like, yeah, in the Bhagavad Gita, Pandita Samadarshinaha, one needs to see through through the eyes of a learned person, which means through the eyes of Shastra, the presence of spirit soul. And this is, for example, one of the major flaws in some of the religions. When Prabhupada was visiting in Moscow, he was having very interesting recorded interview discussion with a professor, Katowski. Professor Katowski has become famous because he associated with the famous uh, Srila Prabhupada. And so at one point in the conversation, Prabhupada directly challenges that uh, why in Christianity you are killing? And in response to that, the uh, the response was, well, there's a difference between humans and animals. Animals don't have a soul. That is actually the, so. If animals don't have a soul, how they're living?
Symptoms.
Huh?
How they're showing all symptoms.
How they are?
Showing all symptoms, growth.
Yeah, right. How they are going through the 6 changes of life, from birth till death, and in between. There's consciousness. There's feelings of happiness or distress, whatever. Yeah. So that's uh, that means incomplete, uh, wrong understanding. So in that spirit only, in that spirit means seeing these 3 things: God, His material creation, and the living entities. We can know that everything that be is Brahman and nothing but Brahman. So therefore, Prabhupada sometimes would explain that for the pure devotee, there is no material world. He sees everything. Huh? Yes. Bhagavad Gita is the synthesis of the ultimate truth in the fact that Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is the begetting father of everything. Nature is the supreme mother, impregnated. This is nice explained in the 14th chapter, which Prabhupada I think is going to quote here. Yes. Um, Nature is the supreme mother, impregnated with the seed of living entities, and the living entities in multiple forms of different species of life, 84 lakhs varieties, are the children of such father and mother as above mentioned. Actually, this verse that we're going to read now is in the purport. Prabhupada mentions how sometimes material nature is called Brahman. The Lord impregnates this Brahman through Mahavishnu, the glance of Mahavishnu. That's a whole topic. So here's a verse. Mama yonir mahad brahma
Mama yonir mahad brahma.
tasmin garbham dadamyaham
Tasmin garbham dadabhyam.
sarva oh sambhava sarvabhutanam
Sambhava sarva bhutanam.
tato bhavati bharata
Tato bhavati bharata.
sarvayunishu konteya
Sarvayonishu kaunteya.
murtaya sambhavanti yaha.
Murtaya sambhavantiya.
Tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita.
Aham bija pradapita.
Translation to text 3 and 4 from the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled The 3 Modes of Material Nature. Actually, a very important chapter where Krishna in detail speaks about how the living entity takes birth in the material world and how immediately becomes entangled or conditioned by the 3 modes of material nature. So, translation to text 14.3, the total material substance, material substance called Brahman, is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. And followed by text 4, it should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material world, and that I am the seed giving father. See, only those who develop, we could call a theistic view of life, uh, only those who accept the spiritual dimension, spiritual reality, can therefore properly understand and therefore properly utilize material nature. Mm. So we continue reading here. We can know from this fact that there is a sweet transcendental interrelation between all living entities, irrespective of not only caste, creed, and color, between man, but between man and beast, man and birds, man and reptiles, man and plants, etc. And so also between man and God, and between God and others, and so on. This very nice point. One person some time back had posted uh, one incident of he had tried to approach one, what was it? One dog who was extremely agitated um, because he had been ill-treated. But slowly, uh, by giving time and attention, in other words, by establishing a relationship, that dog, which was previously uh, very inimical, became very friendly. So Prabhupada is making the point that actually there's meant to be a natural loving relationship because between the living entity and the material nature, between living entity and different species of life in the material nature, and between living entity and Krishna. Uh, so this is the definition given actually in the seventh chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where knowledge is explained. What is that definition of knowledge? Who knows the definition of knowledge? It is chapter 7, text number 2, and it goes like this. Jnanam teham asavijnanam idam vakshamya sheshataha yaj yadva neha bhuyo nyaj gattavyam avashishyate. Krishna is telling to Arjuna, I shall now declare unto you in full this knowledge both phenomenal and noumenal, by knowing which there shall remain nothing further to be known. So this is very much lacking in modern day society. Uh, in general, people are uh, not conscious uh, of other living entities, um, and not understanding that they are also spirit souls, mm, and that we are meant to, like Krishna, he is the Sridham Sarvabhutanam, the well-wisher of all living entities, and therefore one of the prescribed activities for householders every day is to give prasadam, isn't it? I think in villages in India, at least in some places, they have that habit. They have that in Bali actually also, of when they take their food, they put some aside that they will give to some animal. So the consciousness of the welfare, of course, the real welfare is not simply food, but is actually uh, giving other living entities opportunity to awaken to their original Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada is mentioning here how there is meant to be a sweet transcendental interrelation uh, between all living entities. And this is only possible when we put God or Krishna in the center. Mm. And that was, of course, demonstrated by whom? By so many people. by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he traveled from Jagannath Puri to Vrindavan, and he passed through the forest of what is called Jarakanda. We went to Jarakanda forest, but we didn't go to that particular place. There is, they have kept, they have identified that place where Lord Chaitanya stayed. It's near one nice river, and they claim to have the footprints of Lord Chaitanya in the rock there. So Lord Chaitanya, because he was in that mood and that consciousness of full compassion, and uh, the animals, the wild animals in the forest, could identify, could sense that, and they became very friendly to the point of dancing with the Lord. And kirtan, don't try that unless you're very advanced. Dancing with lions and tigers and whatnot. And they were, and the lions, what? Um, the deer and the lion were dancing and embracing one another. Again, not to be imitated. So the Bhagavad Gita can most scientifically raise this standard of life of sweet relation between one thing and another, and as such the Gita Nagari shall be the center of such supreme culture of knowledge. Very interesting. We must, if we accept, if we understand the Bhagavad Gita is a book of knowledge, the book of knowledge, just not any book of knowledge, but the book of knowledge, that means that it is, as pointed out here by Srila Prabhupada, it is a very, Prabhupada makes reference to the word scientific. Yes. Can most scientifically raise this standard of life of sweet relation between one another. The Beatles were singing what song? Uh, what the world needs now is love. Love is what makes the world go round. Love means relationship. Of course, it is perverted in the material world. The source and the origin of unadulterated, pure, uncontaminated love is, of course, spiritual, and that source is Krishna. So Prabhupada is therefore pointing out how this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, uh, he mentions that in other places as well, therefore should be introduced as standard knowledge, standard book of knowledge. The Gita Nagari shall set the example that neither God nor the living being nor nature are in any way antagonistic toward one another, but that all of them exist in harmony as a complete whole unit. I mean, this is what is called ecology. Prabhupada was one of the early ecologists, although he doesn't use the word, but he's speaking about the need and the importance of establishing harmony between. Actually, this was a theme in the what is called period of Renaissance: God, nature, and man. But man means maybe that was lacking. Means a living entity. When Gita Nagari will attempt to harmonize such sweet relations, Prabhupada is really emphasizing this aspect of relation here, which we all know is most important. The Gita Nagari, when Gita Nagari will attempt to harmonize such sweet relation between man and God, man and the world and God, as such an auspicious time, at such an auspicious time only, the United Nations effort to establish peace in the world will be successful, or the dream of a casteless society all over the world will be realized in practice. Interesting. Um, Prabhupada actually was in Montreal in the year of 1967 when Montreal was chosen to host what is called the Olympic World Olympics, and they had chosen as title or as theme "Man and His World," which is wrong concept actually. Man, this is our faulty way of thinking. My world, my this, my that, my family, my country, etc. Yeah, it is man, the world, and Krishna. I mean, it is uh, Krishna's world. Yeah. So, in this context, Prabhupada brings out also the idea of uh, casteless society that he was referring to before, which is Varnasrama Dharma. Yeah. Uh, so it means that actually uh, harmonious relationship between man and man, between man and nature, and between man and God can only be properly realized, can only be properly established when we have a clear scientific understanding of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita, in our eyes, is not simply some uh, religious book belonging to some particular community, but it is meant to be a universal book of knowledge. The dream of a casteless society all over the world will be realized in practice. Yeah, everyone is longing for peace, harmony, and prosperity. This is the solution. Mm. And there is, to continue here, there is no other practical solution of the scientific basis of universal brotherhood or of universal religion without understanding this simple truth of the fatherhood of Godhead, motherhood of nature, and childhood of all living entities. That's real nice, isn't it? The fatherhood of Godhead, the motherhood of nature, and the childhood of all living entities. We should meditate on this. It's quite, I don't recall reading it. I must have read it, but yeah, it stands out right now. We are all, there used to be a group in America in the early 70s called the Children of God. I had made a list of different religious groups to go and see. Um, they were, I think, number one on the list. They were quite, they were present everywhere, all over North America, but it was kind of wishy-washy, very sentimental. You've heard about the Children of God? Yeah.
They have a whole documentary.
They used to stand on different corners, or they used to come where devotees would be, and they would try to intimidate us. But devotees are not so easily intimidated, and eventually they would leave. Children of God. Uh, I went to one of their places. They had a small center that was in Toronto, but it was very, they play modern music, and it's like very wishy-washy. I asked them, what's going to happen when you're leader? disappears, and they didn't really have very clear understanding. It's Christian based. Uh, yeah. So this is the right concept that we can learn by studying nicely the Bhagavad Gita. This simple truth of the fatherhood of Godhead, the motherhood of nature, and the childhood of all living entities. That's real nice. But the living entities, in the spirit of misusing their infinitesimal independence and forgetfulness of their relation with Godhead as eternal servitor and the served, or in other words, when the living entity forgets his begetting father and thinks himself as the son or product of the material nature only, and to be more simple, when the living entity becomes a mother's son only, at that time does Mother Nature, in order to set right her son to become Nubiritan, chastise the living entity in a destructive mood of Mahakali from Bengal. Uh, Mahamaya Durga is the primeval form of all external energies of Godhead. So if we forget about Krishna as the father, then we get in contact or we become subservient or servants of Mahakali. She is described as Dast Bhuja. Krishna is Sadbhuja. Oh, no, I meant to say Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya is Sadbhuja. Uh, Krishna is Dvibhuja. Um, and Mahakali, she is Das Bhuja, with different kinds of weapons in her hands to punish uh, Maheshwara. Because in Bengal, they do that. Moheshwara means Maheshwara. Uh, okay, yeah. Mahesh Asura, who is also her son, as every living entity is. Mohishasura is attacked by the mother's serpent of time on the head and the itch of passion on the body. Moreover, Mahishasura is attacked with her trident pierced on the chest, and thus the representative demon Maha Ashura, is embarrassed in a manner from which he is unable to get out. When the demon is thus set right and surrenders to her will, the Mahamaya then manifests her real identity in the form of Mahalakshmi, engaged in the eternal service of Sri Narayana. And at that time, she gives her son all facilities for the service of the Father, assisted with all opulence, all power, all fame, all beauties, all knowledge, and all renunciation. That's a long paragraph here, and long sentence. We're just about coming to an end here for this section. The example of Ravana and that of Sri Hanumanji may be given here. Both of them are the son of the potency of Godhead. One of them tried to snatch Sri Sita Devi from the service of Sri Ram, while Sri Hanumanji tried to rescue Sri Sita Devi from the clutches of Ravana. By such different treatment of two different sons, Ravana was announced as the Asura or Raksha, while Sri Hanumanji is famous as the foremost devotee of Sri Ramachandra. So that is her choice, to become famous as Ravana or to become famous as Hanumanji. From these two examples, we can conclude that our ideal shall be Sri Hanumanji and not Ravana, who was vanquished in spite of his possessing all material facilities of wealth, followed by knowledge, beauties, fame, etc. Such material acquisitions are unable to protect any Ravana, whatever he may be, from destruction. And the world is full of Ravanas. Therefore, huh? Very minor. Mighty. Yeah. The whole Sri Lanka is described as city of gold. He actually got all the Ashtadikparaka, Indra, Agni, Vayu to be his footsteps to climb the throne. Okay. Just to keep head down, put on their head. Yeah, he was quite bold, definitely. So Prabhupada is warning us here, or giving us good examples and good instructions also, that we are sons, and so we have a choice either to be son of yes, and if we will follow in the footsteps of Ravana, the same we will meet the same end as Ravana. Ravana was destroyed by Hanumanji and by Lord Ramachandra. So modern atheistic demoniac civilization, in a very pointed purport, while describing the fight between Lord Nrsingadev and Hiranyakashipu. At one point, actually, Hiranyakashipu grabs Nrsingadev, and all the demigods who are watching become very disturbed. But for some time, the Lord plays, because he likes to fight. And then in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that in the same way that Lord Nrsingadev, when he finally decided, okay, game over, so he just, within a moment's notice, he just picked up, no more, I'm tired of playing this game, so he picked up Hiranyakashipu, as we know, and he finished him off with the nails, sharp razor-like nails. So Prabhupada in the purport mentions, therefore, those of demoniac mentality in modern age today should take note how within a moment's time, just as Lord Nrsingadev finished off Hiranyakashipu, the demons of the day, who are very insignificant compared to Ravana, can be finished in a moment's notice. Yeah, that day will come. So, any comment or question?
The question regarding the relation man and animals.
Between man and
animals.
And what?
Animals.
Animals. Oh, okay. Yeah, animals. Yes, that needs to be understood properly. So, what's your question?
The proper approach toward new products by devotees, because I have different views or opinions on this topic from senior devotees. For example, Krishna Maharaj said once that we should not, or better to use plant oil than use ghee from unprotected cows. for example. But on the other hand,
to use what? Oil?
Plant oil.
Plant oil.
but on the other hand, other male devotees are very skeptical. For example, about veganism. To how to solve this issue. Devotees should avoid milk products from dairy industry.
Okay. So the question is in relation to this light now has become useless. Light. The light, yeah. What should be the relation between man and animal, especially in the context of devotees? And specifically, you're asking, should we still accept milk, dairy milk from commercial sources? And I couldn't quite understand about oil from plants
As a substitute, instead of using ghee, you could use plant-based oil.
instead of ghee. Okay, I didn't hear that. Instead of using ghee, oil. I mean, plant-based oil. Our proper understanding should be what is recommended in the Shastra, and we we don't artificially become vegans because is not based on a very thorough philosophy. It's not based on Shastra. What is based on Shastra and what is common, of course, to veganism is that we should avoid cruelty directly and indirectly to all living entities. This is what is being conveyed here in the purport or in the essay on Gita Nagari, how there should be a full and complete harmony between man and man, man and nature, and man and God, or man and Krishna. So this remains a very controversial topic in terms of milk, for example. Have you read the recent book, Bhakti Milk?
I just have to
I have a copy, actually, you can borrow it. I was given a copy by the author herself a week back or so. And many of our senior devotees, senior leaders, have very have taken a serious decision to avoid taking milk from commercial dairy. And there are, we have to make, some alternatives are there, not many, but we have to work towards making the alternative. The alternative means this is part, very much, an integral, if not essential and vital, as well as urgent part of our mission to Prabhupada's direct instruction was one of the purposes of the Krishna consciousness movement is to bring a complete overhaul within society and to revert to the more prescribed natural way of living based on what is being referred to here in this essay on Gita Nagari, classless society based on Varnas and Ashramas, and based especially the economic basis should be in connection with land and cows. So that has already been decided as a resolution within our society, as we know, that we should only be offering ahimsa milk. But ahimsa milk, just like ahimsa food, is not actually the real standard. There's a standard beyond simply ahimsa. And many people have different definition of what ahimsa means also. So Excuse me. So we should, uh, whenever we are conscious, it's a question of developing or raising our consciousness. When we are aware that we are uh, directly contributing to the suffering of other living entities, uh, and the example of taking milk, commercial milk, which we should understand also is not real milk, just because it is white. In India, you can find a lot of red substance, which is absolutely, there's no trace of milk whatsoever, isn't it? Uh, so um, we are deluding ourselves, in thinking that it is all right. Uh, Therefore, we should be striving. I mean, Srila Prabhupada has instructed us in this way to work towards self-sufficiency, to work towards protecting cows, to work towards living with cows in developing such self-sufficient communities. And and our devotees and our society has just been, dragging his feet in that respect and not doing it. So therefore, uh, we we should be aware it's not only milk. We should be aware of the need and the importance, for example, to wear a himsa cloth. Most of us are not wearing a himsa cloth. Most of us are not eating a himsa food also. Uh, and most of us are not living in ahimsa buildings or homes. And most of us are also not taking ahimsa medicines. So the whole modern setup is complete. I mean, to the core is rotten. That doesn't mean that we simply conclude that, well, that's the way it is, and we accept that. Rather, the more we understand the scientific teachings that are there in the Bhagavad Gita and further elaborated upon in books like the Srimad Bhagavatam, then we will actually be taking certain decisions and certain steps towards, reviving this culture, by which, and it is only by reviving this culture that we will learn how to reintroduce uh, ahimsa food. Uh, in discussing with farmers, for example, I mean, that's a whole, I was mentioning how there's a wealth of information in these tapes, which have mostly been transcribed also. So it's not a big, well, it will be time consuming because there are hundreds of such interviews. But so many of the farmers are 100% aware of the of how destructive is modern day agriculture. They're completely aware of the destructive nature of chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides, but they don't see any other means right now because they're not properly directed. Rather, they are misdirected. They are encouraged, to buy such artificial and destructive products. And many of them expressed, because one of the questions was, what is your opinion of the state of affairs in the world today? And to those who answered, and most of them answered in that way also, that it was bad. I mean, very few said it's fine. uh, so then I had a follow-up question. Well, what is, according to you, the remedy? So many of them actually mentioned we have to come back to natural farming. They mentioned about natural farming, of course, here in India especially, and of course, the devotees whom I interviewed also had the proper answer that we need to reintroduce basic morality, basic principles of God consciousness, isn't it? And otherwise, we are just like now. So many of the policies. I was just reading up. It's a whole big subject matter. So many of the policies in what is called animal husbandry here in India and around the world, for that matter, they're constantly reviving their 5-year plan, which they started 20, 30 years ago. Most of the time it's a 5-year plan, then they reevaluate, and they're constantly changing. And one of the policies, for example, is that here in India is to, on a massive scale, go for the castration of bulls. Another one is to introduce gene technology or genetic manipulation, and in terms of artificial insemination, which they have concluded is, from their perspective, the more practical and more effective way. Huh?
They've been doing artificial
Yeah.
My grandfather was in Central Delhi.
Yes. So the idea is that, for example, now they want to systematically, because technology is allowing this, to only inject sperms that will produce male calves. I'm sorry, female calves, to avoid male calves because we have no use. In modern, lifestyle, we have no use for bullocks. So these are all against Shastra. These are actually demoniac policies. These are adharmic policies, and it's because we are lacking in basic understanding. One of the most basic fundamental understanding is that actual economy is meant to be based on Krishi Goraksha. That is so fundamental. I mean, it is reflected in Vrindavan, especially. This is Krishna's example to the whole world. And that has been actually followed here in India up until just a few hundred years ago. That a man's real wealth is by the number of cows and bulls that he has, amount of land he has, amount of grains he can produce, etc., like that. So there definitely needs to be more discussion on this particular point so that devotees can understand. We have, in the early days, we didn't know much better, and we were very new to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada is making this point here way back, in 1956 when he wrote the essay on GITA NAGARI. How to establish the natural, proper relationship between man and man, man and nature, men and animals. Men and nature means men and all different living entities. The trees are living entities, and we've practically abolished or completely deforested most of the countries around the world. So, yes, one can substitute for ghee, but the best is to work towards gradually reinstating or reestablishing that culture. It's an integral part of our mission, and in general, we are doing very, very less in that respect. Definitely more could be said and more discussions on this, but we have to bring this to a close for now. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Hare Krishna. Yes. Huh? This has to be closed. Well, huh? Yeah. Well, I think they were maybe dampened by quite a few days of rain.